Well, hi, everybody. It's Ezra Levant from Rebel News. Great to see you. You know, from time to time, I do these live streams. Most of the time, it's my colleagues Sheila Gunn-Reid and David Menzies. But there's so much going on, and Sheila's super busy, and David's actually taking a well-deserved break. So, perfect opportunity for me to hop back in the chair. There's so much going on in the world. Like every other Canadian, I've been riveted by the trade war that never needed to be. Yeah, I remember clear as a bell when Donald Trump tweeted to both Mexico and Canada saying, and this was shortly after his election victory in November, he said, by the time I take office on January 20th, I want both borders sealed to drugs and to illegal migrants. And I always thought, boy, we're such a small percentage of the problem in terms of open border migration to Mexico. He probably just put Canada in there because he didn't want to be seen to be obsessing over Mexico. That's what I thought. Because just the raw numbers, Canada is so much smaller. I since learned that actually the number of suspected terrorists apprehended at the border on the Canadian side is larger than on the Mexican side. I didn't know that. But I assumed that this was Trump just signaling, I'd like to get things started really quickly. I don't want to wait till inauguration on January 20th before I start signaling what I want to do. So it was his way of giving Canada and Mexico a chance to get a head start so everyone could be in harmony on Jan 20th. It was kind of a transition move, buying himself a couple extra months. Now, the president of Mexico, Claudia Sheinbaum, if I'm saying her name right, immediately phoned Trump and immediately agreed. Mexico is so dependent on the United States in a number of obvious ways, but other ways. For example, the number of remittances from Mexican workers in the United States sending money back home is an enormous source of capital for Mexico in a way that doesn't really apply to Canada. And I think Claudia Sheinbaum, and I think maybe it's a language issue. They speak Spanish. America in the whole speaks English. So they're not in the same sort of media mean girls about Trump world. I think Mexico has its own sort of inferiority complex and its own psychological issues dealing with mighty America. But I think she basically said, all right, we're going to seal the border. It really wasn't on them. It was on Biden, wasn't it? But in the case of Canada, as you know, the Liberal leader, the lame duck Liberal leader, who's only here until March 9th, Justin Trudeau, immediately skipped over what Trump actually wanted and went straight to the trade war. Oh, we'll fight back. And it was so obvious of what insurance companies call a moral hazard. Have you ever heard that phrase? A moral hazard is when the risk of you doing a bad thing becomes so large that you actually choose to do the bad thing for rational reasons. In insurance, it would be If you don't have a deductible on your car, like if you don't have to pay the first $500 or $1,000 of a fender bender, then you're probably going to drive a little more recklessly because you know there's no deterrent to doing it. The reason insurance companies have a deductible is so that you feel the pain. So you're going to be driving for the first amount of money. So you're going to drive a little better. And if there's something catastrophic that happens, sure, they'll cover it, but they want you on your good behavior. I think you can just sort of think of all the moral hazards we have in Canada because consequences are removed from responsibility. So, for example, our healthcare system, we never actually see the real cost of it. So we think it's free. And so there's probably a lot of decisions that Canadians make that they wouldn't make if they even just knew what the costs were. Anyway, moral hazard. The moral hazard that Justin Trudeau, Melanie Joly, and now Mark Carney and Chrystia Freeland have is that in the case of Trudeau, this is his swan song. He's out of here in almost exactly a month. This is his way to end on a nicer note than being driven out by his own party and humiliated by Chrystia Freeland. So he wants to go out as Captain Canada. And by the way, I think it's quite likely he's going to move on March 9th, but I wouldn't say it's 100% likelihood. I'd say it's more like 90%. And as to his successors, Mark Carney and Chrystia Freeland, again, who would they rather meet in the next election? Pierre Poilievre, strong, commanding lead, very solid on issues like carbon tax, or would they rather fight against Donald Trump, the outside marauder, who is less popular in Canada than Poilievre? And again, they can paint themselves as Captain Canada. And as I've always said, when you campaign against Donald Trump and here's the moral hazard, I mean, tariffs would be a bad thing for Canada. If they slapped import duties on stuff we sell Americans, that will cause Americans to choose other sources for those things or make Canadian factories actually relocate into the US. That's a bad thing for us. But if it allows Chrystia Freeland or Mark Carney to say, look at Donald Trump, he's devastated our economy, to sort of cover over the fact that the Liberals, in fact, have devastated our economy for almost 10 years, that's the moral hazard I mean. So it's been fascinating to watch. And Trump gave both Canada and Mexico a reprieve a couple days ago. And now he said in both cases he's going to watch how things go for 30 days. To tell you the truth, I think it is fair to say that Justin Trudeau didn't particularly concede a lot. To say that, these these drug cartels are terror groups, what does Trudeau really care? To say there'll be 10,000 people on border patrol. Well, Bill Blair, I don't know if you saw this, Olivia, Bill Blair immediately clarified that none of those will be soldiers, and that'll include off-site staff. That's just bureaucrats. So I actually don't think Trudeau made concessions because I don't think Trudeau wanted to make concessions. I think he wanted to fight. We'll see how that goes. In fact, the most convincing argument to Donald Trump, do you have that Michigan senator that we used the other day, Olivia? The most convincing argument, I think, that protected Canada was certainly not from Justin Trudeau, who wanted a trade war, certainly not from Chrystia Freeland. And I'll show this video later, Olivia, the video of one of several times when Chrystia Freeland boasted to Liberal supporters that Trump hates her, and that's why they should support her. Talk about a moral hazard. Like normally you want to succeed, you want to win-win with the other party of a negotiation. When you're bragging that the person on the other side of the table hates you, that's your way of saying, I value the fight more than the resolution of the fight. Anyways, let me know when you have it. The clip of the Michigan senator. I think it was Howard Lutnick was the witness before the Senate. Lutnick is the Commerce Secretary for Donald Trump, and a senator from Michigan, who I think is Democrat, I'd have to double check, was explaining why import tariffs would hurt American automakers. And go ahead and play a clip. I think you have it on the screen there.
You know, I know that tariffs are certainly a powerful and a positive tool that can be used, but they need to be used strategically. They need to be used thoughtfully. And that's why I called for 100% tariffs on Chinese vehicles last year. And while I'm going to continue to fight for aggressive trade policy when it comes to our relations with China. As a senator from Michigan, I'm particularly focused on manufacturing. We know how to make things in Michigan. And I don't think you can be a great country if you don't actually make things. And that's what we do in my state. And I want to work with the administration to make sure we're growing that sector as well as creating good paying jobs that result from manufacturing. However, I am concerned that President Trump's plan to impose tariffs on Canada and Mexico for the rest of the world, in fact, it could be in a matter of days, is what we are hearing, could hurt our manufacturers who do considerable trade back and forth, as we discussed in the office. Michigan is the home of the top three border crossings in North America. We're two of them. And a lot of that are auto parts that go back and forth. It's a highly integrated industry. And our auto companies are very concerned about what those tariffs might mean to cost, particularly to the cost of vehicles. Already, something we discussed, I'm concerned about the high cost of vehicles. Many families can't afford them now. And if tariffs are put in place that deal with that seamless trade that goes on with Canada, that in the short run could definitely have an impact on prices and make cars even more unaffordable. I don't think that's something the American people want to see, and I'm afraid it would hurt consumers as well as also hurt those workers. So my question for you, sir, is talk me through how those tariffs would be implemented, what you're thinking.
And then Lutnick responds that the tariff is the penalty for not fixing the border. He has some interesting thoughts, but wouldn't you say that's a Democrat senator? His name is Gary Peters. He's from Michigan. Did you hear his case? He is a sanctions and tariffs guy. He wants a 100% tariff on China. Why? Because China is a competitor to Michigan and to America when it comes to cars. But did you hear what he said about how a tariff on auto parts would really hurt American automakers? Because if you know anything about the Ambassador Bridge and Michigan and Ontario, Windsor and Detroit, there really are. It's sort of like that town in Alberta called Lloydminster that's half on the Alberta side, half on the Saskatchewan side. It's an interesting bi-jurisdictional place. And I think that's what Senator Peters was saying there, is the same car is made partly in Canada and partly in the States. If you smack the Canadian side with tariffs, it's going to hurt the whole product. I thought that was the most convincing speech I heard coming from America against tariffs on Canada. The second most convincing person, of course, is Alberta Premier Danielle Smith, who's probably had 100 meetings in Washington, D.C. and other places in the last couple of months. There's an America First case for putting tariffs on products that could or should be made in America. But with the oil sands, you can't move them to America. They stay where they are. On the auto sector, you could move factories into America, but really Windsor is like a satellite of America. They have had free trade for decades. It's called the Auto Pact. Anyways, my point is these were the people likely who were more effective. That's Senator Peters, who I thought he came across very well. And in fact, I had to Google to check that he was a Democrat. He was so respectful of Lutnick and even Trump. I guess the Senate is slightly less partisan because they have 6-year terms. They're more collegial. There's only 100 of them. The reason we do not have tariffs on our country right now is not because of Trudeau, Carney, or Freeland. They all want them. Understand, they want them for their political careers. Same with Doug Ford. The reason we don't have tariffs in Canada right now is because Danielle Smith convinced the administration that it would be nutty to tax Canadian oil, which just goes to U.S. refineries and then on to gas stations. You're not going to move the oil sands to America, and 100% of that cost is going to be borne by those American refineries. And people like Senator Peters are saying, listen, if you understand the auto industry like I do, you understand it is integrated across the border, and you can't change it like that. That's why we don't have tariffs in Canada today. Now, Trump says he's going to revisit this in 30 days, and he might. And I think there's a list of issues that Trump has other than immigration and drugs. He mentioned that why are there no American banks allowed in Canada? Don't you think that's a good question? While we're at it, why are no American airlines really allowed? Well, actually, I guess they do fly in and out, but there's a lot. Here's a better example: cell phones. Have you ever Googled what cell phone prices like data are in other countries? Canada has literally like the first or the second most expensive cell phone costs in the world. It's because they're protected from competition from the US. How much do you love Rogers or Bell or Telus? I have, over the course of my life, had cell phones with each of those companies. They are all terrible people. And they're terrible people because they don't have to be good. In a normal market, everyone's jostling for the clients and they're trying to be friendly. I mean, think of how competitive, say, the restaurant industry is, the service, the hospitality industry. They're called these nice things because they're trying to love you and woo you and win your heart. When was the last time a cell phone company treated you with love and respect and hospitality? Why aren't they called hospitality or service industries? Because they don't have to be. Again, there's a kind of a moral hazard there too when you think about it, because you can't escape the monopoly or the oligopoly. You can't escape Bell, Shaw, and Rogers because where's T-Mobile? Where's Vodafone? I don't even know what they're called in America, or I know T-Mobile and AT&T. I don't know all the names of the different cell phone companies. Why can't I choose one of them? I don't have to. Why can't I choose an American bank? I'm not going to be forced to, but why can't I choose to? And that's one of the reasons we have the worst banks and the worst cell phone companies in the world. It's a moral hazard. And by the way, I think once we deal with the border thing, Donald Trump might come for those others. And you might say, well, that's not fair. That's not friendly. That's not nice. What happened to being best friends? Well, why should Canadian banks have access to American? There's a lot of TD Bank. Have you ever traveled through the United States? There's a ton of Canadian banks in there. Why isn't it reciprocal? And Trump will talk about how we lie down on the job when it comes to our military. Can you pull up Andrew Coyne's tweet where he's gone bonkers? He says Canada should consider pulling out of the Five Eyes intelligence alliance. I don't know if you know what the Five Eyes are. There's all these international groups. There's the G7. Those are 7 countries that have amongst the largest economies in the world. It doesn't quite, but Canada's in the G7. It actually generally shouldn't be. There's the G20, which is a larger group. There's NATO, which is a North American treaty organization. But there's something called the Five Eyes, and I sort of call it the super friends. They're the 5 best friends. Can you guess who's in them if you don't know? Canada, the United States, the United Kingdom, Australia, and New Zealand. So those are like the League of Democracies. Italy's not in there. France is not in there. Israel's not in there. These are the 5 closest buddies. You could call them the Anglosphere. And they have something called the Five Eyes because it has to do with spying. If you're looking for it, Olivia, I retweeted him. So maybe it's faster to find it on my Twitter account. So the Five Eyes is basically how the CIA shares information with CSIS, shares information with MI6 and whatever it's called in Australia and New Zealand. It's like it's really extra secrets that we share with each other. And obviously, the little guys are the chief beneficiaries of that. I mean, I have a lot of concerns about CSIS and their focus on truckers and right-wingers and crazy stuff like that. I'm sure CSIS does some good work, but just in terms of resources and people and budgets, the CIA and even MI6 are vastly superior. So Canada obviously gets the best out of that deal. If it's information sharing. I'm sure for every tip that we give the Yanks that they don't already know in the CIA, there's 100 tips they give us. I mean, it's sort of a joke that we're in the Five Eyes and it's equal. Here, blow that up and show what Coyne said, and I'll show you my reply. Andrew Coyne wrote, he's responding to Trump offering the CIA buyouts and the FBI. And Coyne says, this is just utterly dismaying. The CIA will no longer be defending America. and the free world from hostile dictatorships. It will be defending the hostile Trump dictatorship from the free world. Another reason to keep US out of Five Eyes loop. There's so many little nuggets in there. Andrew Coyne, with whom I used to be friendly about 20 years ago, I think he's gone positively mad. The Trump dictatorship. But my favorite part there from General Coyne is he's going to pull Canada out of the Five Eyes. That'll show the CIA. They'll no longer have, here's what I tweeted in reply. I said, General Coyne says, keep US out of the Five Eyes. Absolutely. The CIA and NSA, that's the sort of their electronic spy agency, will come crawling back to us. We have expertise spying on truckers. We should also tell Trump our 1980s era CF-18s will no longer defend them. We're tired of doing all the work in this relationship. Can you imagine being a writer for the Globe and Mail, which I think is Canada's most prestigious newspaper? It's owned by Canada's richest oligarch, David Thompson. And you're calling Trump a dictatorship, and even if that's just florid language, you're seriously recommending we pull out of the Five Guys security alliance, the spy sharing info alliance, to get back at Trump because we'll show them. Oh my God. That's my point about it would be a disaster for Canada to pull out of the Five Eyes. I mean, every month there's another news story that says US officials tipped off the RCMP. I mean, the last several terrorists that were apprehended in Canada were not found they were let in by Canada. Canada didn't vet them. It was Americans that tipped off Canadian officials to it. So not only is that another way we benefit from our relationship with the United States, but you saw the moral hazard there of imagine saying we're going to leave the Five Eyes alliance to punish Trump because we hate him. Just absolute madness. I should stop focusing on Andrew Coyne because I think his descent into madness is precisely because he's losing relevance. 15 years ago, before Twitter was a big thing, people sort of, I wouldn't say they looked up to pundits, but they thought, wow, he writes a column for the Globe and Mail. He's on TV panel for the CBC. He writes with the Toronto Star. Wow, they are above us. Even if they're not great, they have those positions and we can't get there. There's such a barrier to entry. You have to be part of an exclusive club. Today, talk is cheap. Opinions are cheap. Anyone can be a dramatic blowhard on Twitter. And the prestige and the restriction on competition to be a blowhard, a pundit, someone with hot takes, there's zero barriers to entry. And so unless you're really interesting or really smart or have some really unique ideas, you're competing with countless other regular amateurs on Twitter just pontificating. I mean, I follow I try and follow a range of people. I probably follow about 2,000 people on Twitter. I don't know. And I'll give you an example of someone who I find very interesting. His name is Mike Cernovich. Don't agree with everything he says, but he's got a knack for thinking unconventionally, sort of oblique thinking. And I follow him, again, not because I agree with everything he says, but he's got a way of thinking that I think, wow, he's sort of unusual that way. Yeah, there he is. I've met him a couple times in California. He's a good egg. And he's got about 1.3 million followers, vastly larger than Andrew Coyne. He has a vastly larger impact. His ideas have a vastly larger audience. And again, you can disagree with him. I mean, he's a provocateur sometimes. It takes one to know it. My point is, a guy like Mike Cernovich would not have a position of influence and power 15 years ago. He just wouldn't. He wouldn't have been a Nepo baby, a nepotistic hire. He wouldn't have been part of the insiders club. Whereas a guy, and I'm just picking him as an example because I find him very interesting. there's another guy, Stephen Miller, I follow. I'm not talking about the deputy chief of staff of the Trump administration, just a pundit. And he really boils things down and comes up with like a punchline. Um, the Stephen Miller you had there was the Trump deputy chief of staff. I'm talking about the pundit. Maybe he goes by Steve Miller. Anyways, he just has a way of summing things up with like finding the humor in it. Yeah, I think or maybe that's not the guy. I can't tell. Yeah, that is the guy. Yeah, that guy. He's just funny. And he sums up, you scroll down a bit. Let's see if we can find one. Yeah, I'm just picking at random here. President Trump will sign an executive order Wednesday designed to prevent people who were biologically assigned male at birth. And okay, it's not a particularly witty tweet, but he just says, in quotes, biologically assigned male. And he says it's a very easy scientific process of simply pointing and looking. Okay, that's not his best work there. But anyway, my point is, who's this guy? His handle is Red Steez. I don't even know what that means. He's just some guy. I don't know where he lives. I have no idea really who he is, but just from the sheer talent, he's funny. He makes observations. I think this is a hobby for him. I don't know if he does it for a living. Why am I going on? I'm saying in 2025, you have this existential angst by a class of opinion arbiters, taste makers, who no longer arbitrate opinion or make taste. No one sets or some boomers and seniors who are still operating out of habit might do. But the decline of newspaper subscriptions tells the whole story. I mean, how many people under the age of 40 actually get a paper newspaper anymore? Do you know anyone? I don't think I've got a paper. I subscribe to the Epoch Times, but I did that more out of love than out of actually wait. I mean, and by the way, it's beautifully done. But other than my subscription to the Epoch Times, which I do just out of solidarity, I don't subscribe to a paper newspaper. Why would I? It's going to be 24 hours older than all the news I've found on Twitter. So the rage that the Andrew Coynes have, that they are no longer the taste makers, the arbiters, is palpable. And I love it. And it's the democratization of the media. It's a form of citizen journalism. Granted, it's an easier form of citizen journalism than actually going out there and reporting. We just got back a couple of weeks ago, as you know, from Davos, Switzerland. And being on the scene, reporting the news with a video camera, I think is a higher form of journalism. It's more work, I'll tell you that. But people who are witty and have interesting insights can do great opinion journalism from the bathtub. Hey, did you guys, when I was away, did you guys ever show any of the insect energy bar video? Hey, I want to show you a video. So I was in Davos with our team, and every year we go to Davos. It's the World Economic Forum annual meeting in the Swiss Alps. It's this town called Davos. It's sort of like Banff. It's small. There's really one. Actually, it's about the same size as Banff, I guess. And it's hard to get to. And every year, the World Economic Forum buys up every single hotel room for a week and every single store or restaurant on the main street. And they sort of put up almost like a movie set. They transform the main street. If it's a coffee shop or a store, they actually gut it and put up, like they turn it into the Facebook headquarters or the BlackRock pavilion. Like they transform it. It's like Disneyland. It's a series of false fronts, and they turn it into like a theme park. And then when they're done, all this cladding comes down and those regular stores are back. They pay an enormous amount of money to those stores to give up their spot for a week. I understand that there's a church. We did a report on it. I understand the church rents itself out for $1 million for that 1 week, which sounds crazy, but look at it from the church's point of view. If you can get $1 million by vacating for 1 week, and that's enough to pay for the church all year. Maybe that's a smart thing to do. Anyways, they transform this main street, very hard to get to. We go there every year. We don't get accreditation to go into the inner sanctum, so we sort of hang out outside, and it's pretty cold. And there's other people outside too. I want to show you an interaction I had. I didn't know this guy would be there. I see a guy handing out samples. There's a number of people handing out samples of things all along the street. Normally, they're just giving out free hot chocolate or hot tea to let people keep warm. And it's sort of a gift from, for example, Qatar had a pavilion and they gave away hot tea and dates. Okay. And Facebook has a hot chocolate stand. Anyway, so this guy, I hadn't seen him before, and he was giving away energy bars. Now, this is an 18-minute video. Obviously, I'm not going to play the whole thing, but let me play a little bit. And then I'm going to ask you, Olivia, to fast forward to when the Sikh guy comes in to have a bite, because I thought that was a bit of a laugh. Here, watch with me for a minute. If I want you to have a split screen, I might sort of pipe in, although I think really every thought I had, I said to the fella. Here's me in Davos talking to a guy handing out energy bars. And I want to ask you, can you see the brand name of this energy bar? And if you're a dad or anyone who's watched Disney movie with your kids, do you recognize the name? I'll tell you the name right now. Pumbaa. Olivia, do you know what Pumbaa is? She says that she's not familiar with Lion King. For anyone who has little kids, you've probably watched The Lion King. It's such a great movie. Pumbaa is the wild boar who convinces Simba, the lion, not to eat him. And he convinces the lion, don't eat meat, eat bugs instead. It's a character in a Disney movie called Pumbaa. He's also notorious for farting, which is sort of the kids' joke in the movie. But his name is Pumbaa. Let me show you the guy I met on the streets of Davos who was handing out Pumbaa branded energy bars. Take a look. Here.
Hi, I'm doing a promotion tour for a recently funded company that is doing these bars. It's Pumbaa Food, and we are producing upcycled food. And well, this is our energy bar, which uses insect protein as a protein source.
Now, I want to be very fair to you because you've invited me to talk to you.
Okay.
When I hear you say that these are insect bars, I have a natural reflex to gag. I think there's a human evolutionary reaction to things that historically have caused us sickness. That's why when we see maggots, we almost throw up. It's nature's way of saying, don't eat that. That's bad. Why would you want people to eat insects? I just make your best case for what I think is an astonishing proposition.
Well, the thing is, I don't know if it is really an instinct or if it's just learned behavior that we have an aversion against these insects or against spiders or anything. Because in other parts of the world, especially in Africa and Asia, many people eat many kinds of insects. And so maybe we just need to get used to it.
Now, you said the word should. Maybe we should get used to it. Why wouldn't we eat beef and chicken and fish and vegetables? Why should we? Should is sort of a moral word. It is something we ought to do. If we can eat chicken and beef and fish and vegetables, why are you saying we should eat insects?
Well, it's not in every occasion that we can have beef and cattle and pigs and chicken. For example, if there are a few resources in water, or if the food distribution for hay and stuff that these animals that we mentioned before need, then it can be challenging, and then it can be easier to just feed the worms or the insects with some things that are very easy to store. Or if you want to take the example that we will go to other planets and we will conquer Mars, for example, if we want to take pigs and cows with us to Mars, it will be difficult because of the space and because they need a lot of room. And you can basically...
Yeah, we We need to eat insects on Mars is not a particularly compelling argument for eating it on Earth right now, but it is a terrifying thought. I mean, what will people eat on Mars? And it would terrify me if you had to eat bugs. But while I was standing there talking to this guy, people came up for the free things. That's the kind of place it is in Davos. There's gift bags and free stuff, and it was cold out. Anyway, one fella came up, and I tell you, well, you can see for yourself that the very friendly insect bar dealer, he would say it's made with insect protein, but he wouldn't really emphasize it. I'll give him credit; he did say it, but nowhere on the bar itself does it say insect protein. And these people were just thinking, "Give me a freebie." They weren't listening really. They were just, I mean, do you really listen carefully when you go for a sample at Costco and the lady starts saying, well, this is made for, no, you just want the freebie. Watch this guy. There's a fellow with a turban, and then there's some kids after him. Let's start with this Sikh gentleman. I want to show you his reaction.
Old brand from the mill that is used, that is a leftover from the milling process. Would you like to try? Please come.
Sure.
It's a protein or energy bar made with insect protein.
That's great.
Yeah, use the way to our
I'm-
web shop.
And this
you
is
can order online.
and I would say this is the right place to offer this, because here when you walk so much, you get into the meetings, you have so much of muscle exercise, brain exercise. At the time you are offering such a energy kind of a chocolate, it's
Yeah.
a great gesture.
You will very quickly get rid of your muscle pain because it's a big energy resource.
But that's nice. That's nice.
Enjoy.
One for my friend also.
Can I ask you, sir?
Yeah.
Can I ask you if you would taste it on camera and tell me what you think?
Yeah, I can do that if you want.
Now, did you hear him say that there's insects in that?
I didn't hear that.
Okay, that's
what I said.
I joined late actually. I didn't know.
I said it's an energy bar with insect protein as a protein source.
Oh, is it?
how do you feel about that?
That's funny.
Now,
That's funny. That's
would
funny.
you try it?
I think I won't.
I think I won't.
I am skeptical as well. Can I ask why you won't eat the bugs?
So of course, I mean, if it is coming up with insects, that's not a thing which we really expect that, because this is something
Didn't
we
expect
are
that,
here
he
for.
says.
We want to
Anyways,
to
he was
conserve-
backpedaling. He was going to eat the bar. Now, I should tell you that others came, and there was kids who I later saw that I think they were there from a kid's school or something, and they didn't care. Maybe there was a language barrier, but they ate the bugs. And I don't understand it. You know, there is enough food on Earth to feed everybody. The problem is with distribution and economic systems. There's never been more calories produced in the history of man. There's never been more agriculture. Famines are a thing of the past. They're almost unheard of now. Never in the history of our planet have so many people eaten so much of good, healthy food. As I said to the gentleman later, if you were truly starving, of course you would eat anything that was not poisonous. And if you look to many cultural foods, it's sort of poor food. It's what you eat when you have very little money. And so you eat sort of meats that you normally wouldn't, and you cover up the flavor with spicy sauces and whatever. He was saying in poor parts of Africa, they eat lots of insects. Well, yeah, because they're poor and they're starving. You know, as GDP grows, people prefer chicken and beef. And I found his arguments unconvincing. Obviously, there's an ideology under it. I asked him who was funding Pumbaa. He claimed he didn't know. He said that wasn't his side of the operation. But I think there's a reason he's at the World Economic Forum, because there's an ideological push. He did, I won't make you watch the whole 18 minutes, but one thing he did say was it has a lower footprint in the environment than cattle or poultry or whatever. So it really is the two classes, the private jet class, the Michelin reviewed restaurants, and then the little people who have to eat the bugs, as Klaus Schwab would say. Hey, speaking of Klaus Schwab, you know he's the head of the World Economic Forum, and thank you for letting me show you that video. We had some other fun videos too. Hey, you know what? I just want to show one more bit. everyone has seen the Larry Fink video. I'm pretty sure. Did you play the Paul Ryan video earlier? I want to show one more video, and the reason I'm choosing this one is it's short. It's about 3 minutes, and I just want to show it to you because I don't think I've done the live stream since I'm back from Davos. It's a George Soros kind of place. It's his favorite place, and Alex Soros, the son of George, has taken his father's place. And the two leading contenders for the Liberal leadership, Mark Carney and Chrystia Freeland, are both they were directors of the World Economic Forum. So here you have Klaus Schwab boasting about penetrating the cabinets. I don't know if you ever saw that clip of Klaus Schwab literally boasting of penetrating the cabinets in Canada. And people said, oh, no, that's just braggadocio. That's a conspiracy theory. Yeah, no, here we go. The next both of the top contenders for the next leader of the Liberal Party are World Economic Forum directors. But tell me it's a conspiracy theory. Anyways, it's a left-wing place. I'll give Klaus Schwab this, though. He has invited Argentina's libertarian president, Javier Milei, twice. That's bold. I'll give him credit for that. And Donald Trump actually made an appearance by video, and he talked about freedom in America first. But you generally don't see, and Trump just appeared by video. There's no way he was going to fly from Mar-a-Lago all the way up to Davos and back. That would be like 10 hours or 8 hours each way to give a speech to a bunch of communists. But when you're on the streets, you really see Democrats and globalists and schemers and scammers. So it's always surprising when you see a Republican. I found it surprising, at least. And so I spotted Paul Ryan. For those of you who don't know, he was the vice presidential candidate for the Republican ticket about 15 years ago, whatever. He lost. He became the Speaker of the Congress. And he generally was hostile to Trump's agenda in Trump's first term. So Paul Ryan is no longer in Congress, but he's still at Davos. And I didn't want to be mean to him. I didn't want to pick a fight. I thought I was friendly. I said, hey, because remember this, I was there the day after the inauguration. I was in Washington on the Monday. And then I got to Davos, I think Wednesday morning by the time I got there. So it's all anyone was talking about, Donald Trump, Trump. And here I bump into Paul Ryan, who tried to become vice president, failed, was Speaker of the House, but sort of opposed Trump. So I wanted to know, do you have any words for Trump? Do you have any congrats? Do you have any advice? Like my questions, you tell me if my questions were obnoxious. I don't think so. I mean, he was in a public place. He's a public person. I was asking him public questions and in the public interest, and they weren't even tough. But look at his reaction. I want to play the whole thing. Take a look. Here's me and Paul Ryan at Davos about 2 weeks ago. Mr. Ryan, can I ask you for your thoughts on Donald? Give me a word on Donald Trump.
I'm good. I'm good.
Are you optimistic that he'll be a good president?
I'm good.
I mean, I know you're
I don't
good.
like
But,
doing walk and talk interviews. It's just not my style.
well, just give me a word. It sounds like you're
I'm gonna walk and
resentful
talk.
of the president. It sounds like
You're trying to put words in my mouth.
well, then put your own words in your mouth.
You're good at what you do.
Well, I'm not, because I'm not eliciting a good answer from you.
You're not voting yet.
Well, why wouldn't you at least commend the president for his victory?
Yeah, I need you to send me the QR code so I can get in. Yeah. Yeah, just text me the QR code. Yeah. Well, I didn't check that email. Let me check that with you in a second. All right, I'll call you back.
Don't you seem a little
Yeah,
stingy?
I'm a little busy
All
right
the
now.
world leaders are at least congratulating him. You refuse to congratulate the president. That seems.
No, I refuse to talk to you because you're being obnoxious.
I'm not being obnoxious. I'm asking you a very simple, easy question.
Here's what I want you to do. Go on Bloomberg yesterday and look at my TV interview and use theirs.
I think you're jealous. I think you had your shot and you failed, and you're sort of grudging towards Trump, who won. Is that wrong?
Hang on a second. Yeah, there's. Right. No. Yeah, you got to send me the QR code. Right. Yeah, no, that's what I need just to get in. All right. Let me check that email. Okay.
Are you still working out? I'm trying to.
It's not going to entertain your You're being.
What, I mean, you call me obnoxious. Actually, I think you're being obnoxious. You're refusing to say even a grudging congratulations to the new president.
No, I'm just not going to talk to you.
Why?
Hang on a second. All right.
I think you're a sore loser. What are you even doing at a left-wing place like the World Economic Forum? It's not very Republican. Who are you meeting with? Or is that secret?
Right now, I'm trying to navigate my emails. So,
But what are you doing here? Like, this is a George Soros kind of place. Is that your crew now? Is that who you hang with?
Yeah, I don't get it. I mean, I did poke him, are you a sore loser, when he wasn't answering, posing that as a possible reason for him being so reticent. Do you have a word for Trump? Do you have advice? I forget you saw the exact questions I asked. I think Paul Ryan's a loser. I mean, he is literally a loser. He ran for vice president and lost. Yeah, Davos, sort of a weird place, but I like going. Hey, I want to tell you about our sponsor today. Have you heard of GetTheTea.com? GetTheTea.com carries a great selection of all natural herbal teas that will aid your body with an effective and gentle cleanse. Get the Tea, I'm going to read this so I get this accurately, comes in different flavors. They're all designed to cleanse your colon and help maintain optimal digestive strength, digestive health. GetTheTea.com also carries high-quality supplements for help with stamina, blood sugar, blood pressure, and more. For the month of February, you'll get $10 off 2 of their most popular supplements, Allison Advanced to boost immunity and Apple Cider Plus to help with weight management. Prioritize your health with the help of GetTheTea.com. Be your best self in 2025. Go to GetTheTea.com now and enter discount code RUMBLE for an extra 10% off your order. That's GetTheTea.com, discount code RUMBLE for 10% off. That's GetTheTea.com, discount code RUMBLE. And what a delight to have them as our sponsors. Thank you, GetTheTea.com. I suppose I should talk about the 2 WEF directors who are now running for the leadership. And I think Mark Carney's going to win. It's sort of obvious. And by the way, if I was a Liberal, I would want him to win. I wouldn't want Chrystia Freeland. Chrystia Freeland was inseparable from Justin Trudeau for 9 years until they had their falling out in the last 10 minutes of Trudeau's regime. So every single screw up that he made is on her. Every single atrocious policy, from carbon taxes to mass immigration. There's no way she can distance herself from 9.5 years of absolute servile, trained seal clapping. You just can't. Not just trained seal clapping. That would be the backbench. Chrystia Freeland was, in fact, in some ways, I'd say the de facto prime minister. Justin Trudeau is notoriously lazy. He doesn't actually read anything. He just does the fun stuff, and the work actually fell to Chrystia Freeland. But she lacks his social graces and his personality. I find him distasteful, but he can be charming when he turns it on. Chrystia Freeland is off-putting and weird, and I think eminently dislikable. Mark Carney looks good, looks the part, is a fairly smooth talker. He's not a really good retail political guy, doesn't have those instincts. You can't just flip a switch and be a good politician. It really is a trade in itself that requires a lot of practice, and he hasn't had it, but he really doesn't need it. He's running a bubble campaign where he issues a few statements and then hides, which is appropriate because it's whoever manages to sign up the most voters online. It's rife. It's open for manipulation and hijacking from both the Chinese Communist Party and Iran, both of whom I think would favor Mark Carney. But there's no doubt about it. Mark Carney has been a Liberal advisor for many years. And he's a pro-carbon tax guy. He's a pro-World Economic Forum guy. And he thought he would weigh in on wokeness. We've got a video clip of him talking about DEI and wokeness. And I suppose it would be too much to hope for a Liberal candidate to be against woke, but now here's Mark Carney doubling down on being woke. Take a listen.
There's a fever gripping America. And while it rages, Canadians will remain resolute and true to our values. While America engages in a war on woke, Canadians will continue to value inclusiveness.
What does inclusiveness mean? If it means letting people join a project or a team regardless of race, then I'm inclusive. I mean, we don't keep statistics of this race or that religion at Rebel News, but if I'm forced to think of it and put people into boxes, we're inclusive, but that's not woke. That's people who happen to look a certain way having merit. What DEI is and ESG that Mark Carney has spent a lifetime promoting is not inclusiveness. It's affirmative action. It's lowering standards on core merit-based, factors to pump up. Do we have enough Black lesbians in the LA Fire Department? Do we have enough, quota candidates flying Black Hawk helicopters near the DC Washington airport at night? It's not about inclusiveness. It's about promoting values other than merit, which is sort of weird coming from a white male, stale, pale white male in his 60s. He should step aside for a woman if he really is inclusive. Isn't that funny? I think the premiers, other than Danielle Smith, were absolute failures over the last month. And I think Doug Ford was, in some ways, the worst. He was the most opportunistic, who thought he would call a snap election to run against Trump, and that sort of fizzled within a couple days. We've got a clip of him pushing back on Donald Trump's demand that Canada ramp up border security. I want to show that clip of Doug Ford. I just think Doug Ford is hollow, and I just really wish that Rob Ford were still with us. Here's Doug Ford the other day. Take a look.
So we're going to tighten that border up until it squeaks. But it works on both sides of the border, by the way. And I've mentioned this in a couple of newscasts down in the U.S. Yeah, I've been on the PM for a long time about tightening up the border. We are tightening up the border. When President Trump says he needs the border tightened up, we acted immediately. And we're going to continue to act immediately. But let's keep in mind, which I've said to the U.S., and I'll say that, I've said it to the elected officials, it works two ways. We've seen over 25,000 kilos of cocaine, heroin, opioids come across from our southern border into Canada. We've seen illegal guns at 95% of these heinous crimes that are committed, not just in Ottawa, in Toronto, the outlying region, they're all coming from the U.S. So in saying all that, we have to work together. And we have been working together. I met with the DEA. We've met with the Border Patrol. We met with our OPP and RCMP, and everyone's pitching in. That's the way it should work. It's not one-sided here.
Well, isn't he making the case for more border patrols? And yeah, there are a lot of bad things that come up from the U.S. into Canada. Isn't that on us as much as it's on them? I mean, we could take a Trump-like approach and say we demand America seal their northern border, but we've put nothing into our own border. I mean, worse than nothing. We at Roxham Road sent the RCMP there to act as concierges. The Americans didn't mind that because, of course, most of the people leaving America through Roxham Road into Canada were people who were about to be deported or people who were convicted of crimes, and they were more scared of Donald Trump than they were of Justin Trudeau. So, I mean, people think the idea that people will self-deport is absurd and ridiculous. It sort of is, but it happened for almost 10 years under Trudeau because Trudeau positively welcomed illegal crossings into Canada. Well, who do you think wanted to cross illegally? People who had a criminal record, people who were on the run from police, people who were going to be deported, lost a battle. But I agree with Doug Ford in that we need a stronger border. But He's done next to nothing on that. So I think he's sucking and blowing at the same time, but nothing beats the Premier of Quebec, Francois Legault, who, like the others, was calling for a Team Canada approach, namely shut off that Alberta oil to punish Donald Trump. Of course, if Canada had other export markets for our oil, we wouldn't be so reliant on America. I would rather sell our ethical oil to America than to China, of course. But who was it who blocked the pipelines from Alberta to blue water oceans? It was the Liberals of Canada, and it was provincial premiers and provincial governments, including in BC. And Francois Legault was one of the worst. He blocked something called the Energy East Pipeline, which would have taken about 1 million barrels of oil a day from Alberta to New Brunswick, where Canada's largest refinery is, currently being filled with American and OPEC oil. So all this Team Canada, come on, Danielle Smith, stop trying to defend your oil patch and be the sacrifice industry for the rest of us as we fight with Donald Trump. As soon as the tariffs are dropped, listen to Francois Legault say, yeah, that whole Team Canada thing, that's over now. We have gone back to hating Alberta oil. Take a listen.
If during your discussions today, the issues of pipelines came up and whether Quebec would now support either an Energy East or some other kind of pipeline that would take Alberta oil out to markets other than the US.
Yeah. Of course, right now, there's no social acceptability for this kind of project right now in Quebec. But of course, situation, the economy, and what Mr. Trump is doing may change the situation in the future. So if there's a social acceptability, we will be open to these kind of projects. But right now, there's no social acceptability. No.
Okay.
So the phrase I think he is using, social acceptability, has been used in English Canada as sometimes called social license, which is, yeah, you might actually have the license, the actual permit. You might have checked all the boxes, done your environmental test, done your impact assessments, done your Indigenous relations. You might have done all that, but you don't have social license. What's a social license? Exactly. It's whatever an objector or a vetoer has to say. Well, you haven't convinced me, and I can get 100 left-wing Antifa rioters on the street to say, even though polls have always shown support for Canadian oil and pipelines, we're going to block it. And by the way, polls aren't the determiner. You don't have to win an opinion poll to open up a restaurant. You just have to get your permit. Who gives people a social license? How do you get a license for a social license? Well, that's the joke of it. It's whatever the politicians or the media says. And so Francois Legault immediately is basically saying, well, Antifa and environmental extremist groups say no, so it's no. One of the things, Donald Trump is a master of memes, and a meme is basically an idea, isn't it? And if you remember a movie about 20 years ago called Inception with Leo DiCaprio, that movie sort of blew my mind when I watched it. I thought it was very clever, and believe me, you have to pay attention to that movie. It was about ideas and placing ideas in people's minds in a way that they think it's their own idea. How do you do that? And it was sort of a somewhat mystical movie called Inception. How do you place an idea in someone's mind? Because really, in some ways, that's the most powerful weapon of all. Elon Musk regularly says that woke is a mind virus. He says a computer can have a virus and a mind can have a virus. And he talks about the mind virus of wokeism. I think he's exactly right. But you can have a positive idea, you can have a negative idea, you can just have an idea at all. Donald Trump is a master of inception, of planting ideas. Here's a guy who's talking about nationalizing Greenland, reconquering the Panama Canal, taking Greenland away from Denmark. And he has repeatedly, even though it's goofy banter on Instagram and Twitter, talked about making Canada the 51st state. Now, I say to my American friends, do you really want a block of Democrat voters the size of California in your electoral college? Do you really want to deal with the challenges of, say, French bilingualism? Do you really want our many problems, or do you just want oil and minerals because you already have access to those without any of the costs? Trump is planting the idea of the 51st state because I think he has detected that Canada is much weaker than it was 10 years ago. The Canadian patriotism has been tamped out and stamped out. And despite the last month of Team Canada, there is no Team Canada. And how fast did Francois Legault get back to, yeah, no, Alberta, you don't have social acceptability. Donald Trump has made every single Canadian pundit and politician talk about the 51st state idea. Now, that's not to say it's going to happen, and it's not even to say that it should happen. But for the first time in ever, first time certainly in 150 years, I mean, one of the reasons for the CP Rail, Canadian Pacific Rail, was to stop BC and the prairies from joining America. Remember, you had California, the gold rush, you had Alaska being purchased from the Russians in the 1860s. You had the ferment of the US Civil War. There was a real chance that America would annex or even invade Canada. It was only 50 years, sorry, not even 50, pardon me, it was only 20 years after the Civil War. In some cases, what am I saying? In some cases, just a few years. 1867 was the birth of Canada, and the CP Rail was about 20 years later. Not since then has the idea of Canada becoming an American territory being discussed as much as it has in the last month. And some people are adamant against it, and some people are passionate against it, and some people are emotionally against it, and some people are historically against it, and some people are culturally against it, and some people out of loyalty to the king or loyalty to their community are against it. Okay. But how many people have thought about it for the first time and thought, you know, I'd like to be part of a country where my dollar is worth something. I'd like to be part of a country that is respected on the world stage and has a military second to none. I'd like to be part of a country that doesn't hate itself the way Trudeau has taught us to hate our own country as genociders. I showed you that poll on my Ezra Levant show, I think it was Ipsos, that the number of young men who support joining the states is in the 40% range. 40% range. And that's without even a campaign. That's just inception. That's just Trump planting an idea. Now, the art of the deal, if you read the book, Trump calls for annexation of Canada and settles for a tweak in the free trade agreement. Trump calls for 25% tariffs on Canada and settles for a stronger border. That's part of his negotiating strategy. He didn't get to be a billionaire in New York real estate without being a savvy negotiator. So maybe his talk about the 51st state is just that. But be careful. Donald Trump has forced Canadians to say, well, what exactly is the value proposition I get from Canada? And that's an unsentimental way to talk about it, but that's precisely how Trudeau has taught us to talk about it. We're a post-national state. We have no core values. That's what Trudeau told the New York Times in 2015. So if all we are is a hotel, and if all we are is if our passport is so worthless that we give it to millions of people who don't care about us, don't know us, don't love us, in fact, many of whom hate us. If our passport is worth nothing, if it's just a passport of convenience, well, which is more convenient, being an American or a Canadian? And it's, you know, you would still live in your house, you would still be on your street, you would still have your routines. It's just that the political overlay of your life would be American instead of Canadian. You wouldn't have to move to America. That's the point. America would move to you. And it's terrifying because when you start to analyze it without the emotions or the loyalties or the sentimentality, without nostalgia, and just say, well, which is better for me now? Would I rather have the province of Ontario I suppose, I don't know if it would be one state or a dozen states. If you were to say, would you rather have Donald Trump as your international spokesman or Trudeau as your international spokesman? Would you rather have Elon Musk and his Doge cost cutters, or would you rather have the corruption and waste of Canada's system? Would you rather have the American dollar with its strength or the Canadian peso? If you took away emotional and nostalgia and loyalty issues and simply talked about the practical changes that would come about with being an American territory, without the emotional loyalty or historical loyalty, Trump makes a compelling case. You'd be richer, you'd be stronger militarily, you'd be diplomatically more powerful, you'd be connected to the world's most energetic economy. As he says, you don't want tariffs, join America. All of those things are true. And if we're going to rely on Team Canada, being Francois Legault and Justin Trudeau and other people who actually don't care much about Canada, I mean, we even have a full-time separatist party in Parliament. If those are the people saying, no, reject Trump, we have something so much better. We have a country where we tear down our statues, we rename Ryerson University to Toronto Metropolitan University, we rename Yonge Dundas Square Sankofa Square, we tear off Sir John A. from our $10 bill. No. But stay for nostalgic reasons. We're destroying the past. We're erasing the past. We are recasting and revising the past as one of genocide. But no, guys, for historic reasons and emotional reasons, you got to stay Canadian instead of having the world's most powerful currency, the world's most powerful army, and the world's most powerful economy. Donald Trump has opened up some ideas, hasn't he? He has indeed engaged in inception. I see a super chat from Ableist, or it's a Rumble rant, I can't tell. Warhorse got caught retconning Henry to be bi and shoehorning an historically inaccurate black Muslim man into KCD2 to cater to regressives and ESG, conning customers under embracers orders. I'm sorry, I don't understand a word you just said, but thank you for your support. Nana Wake chips in $10 and says, social acceptability, Well, there's absolutely no social acceptability for Alberta to provide you equalization payments either, since it's against your morals. So we are glad to stop. Well, that's exactly the thing. Does social license go both ways? The whole idea of social license is a wiggle room. It's a mulligan. It's a cheat code for when you don't want to follow the rules. Just say, social license made me do it. Sure, you had the permits for the Northern Gateway pipeline. Sure, you had the permits for the Energy East pipeline, but it's not socially acceptable, so we're going to stop it. Sure, Quebec, you've got the law on your side when it comes to equalization, but you don't have social license from Alberta to take billions of dollars a year. You're exactly right. It's a loosey-goosiness. I want to say one last thing, and I know you love Rebel News as your favorite website. Thank you for that. But if you're looking for a great place online for news, discussion, and entertainment, then check out Truth Social. Donald Trump's social media website. You'll get breaking news stories and commentary from top media figures. If you want to see Trump's legendary Truth Social posts, then get on Truth Social today. Join a growing community of patriots on a free speech platform designed to avoid censorship and cancellation by big tech. Make your voice heard. Join the movement. Join Truth Social. I like Truth Social. That's where a lot of Trump's statements are from. And they are free speech activists. In fact, I went to one of their events in Washington on Inauguration Day. It was pretty fun. They teamed up with Rumble. So, yeah, there are some things that Trump posts exclusively to Truth Social, which may be a reason in itself. Well, my friends, it's 2:08 Eastern, 12:08 Mountain Time, and thank you for joining me. And I know it's not the same style that Sheila and David have, but I felt like going through some old things. Great to see you again. Hope you tune into my show every night at 8 p.m. Eastern. It's called the Ezra Levant Show. We talk about the news of the day. We interview guests. Sometimes I travel into the field and do reports like I did in Davos. Until then, on behalf of all of us at Rebel World Headquarters to you at home, good night, and keep fighting for freedom.
President Trump has threatened to tariff Canada because of what he says is lethal drug flows. But whether or not we agree with him should not matter. It should not take a foreign leader to get the Liberals to wake up to the drug crisis that they have caused here at home. It should have been enough that we lost 50,000 of our people. We should crack down on drugs, not to please President Trump, but to ensure that not one more mother has to bury her face in her hands on learning that her son died of an overdose in a back alley somewhere. We must stop drugs to save our people and put Canada first. It starts with locking up mass traffickers and manufacturers of this poison with penalties that fit the crime. But what is that crime? Let's call fentanyl trafficking what it is. Mass murder. Selling 40 milligrams of this poison is enough to kill 20 people. It's like spraying bullets into a crowd. You might not know who you're killing, but it's certain someone will die. That's why I'm denouncing today, as part of my Canada First plan, that common sense conservatives will bring mandatory prison sentences. There will be life sentences for anyone caught trafficking, producing, or exporting over 40 milligrams of fentanyl. 40 milligrams is enough to kill 20 people. Anyone who is involved in trafficking that amount of fentanyl will get a life sentence. We will lock them up and we will throw away the key. And 15 years for traffickers caught with between 20 milligrams and 40 milligrams will be the new mandatory sentence.